Hello, collectors of all ages. This is Mojo Mike with Mojo Mike Vintage Cards, and this is my first YouTube video. I want to start off with a shout out to the content creators who really encouraged me, some more directly than others, but I want to thank Chris from Missouri and Jason with Everyday Card Collector and Craig from Midlife Sports Cards. Those are the three guys that I've communicated the most or I've watched the most content of, along with Sammy Thunder, because I love when he goes to shows and shows the vintage cards. But those first two guys, Chris and Jason, they've really encouraged me to become part of this community. So, tip of the cap to them. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas, home of the Kansas Jayhawks. And for a while on YouTube, I didn't have any videos, but I followed people as Jayhawker Mike Vintage Cards. And I decided that kind of was too narrow of a name, especially for my purposes of I'm going to start selling cards at shows for the first time in many, many years. And I thought having the business name Mojo Mike or Mojo's Vintage Cards sounded a little bit more appealing than Jayhawker Mike, especially since I can do a lot of shows in the Kansas City, Missouri area. And, there's a big rivalry between Missouri and Kansas that goes back to the pre-Civil War days. So that being said, this is my first video and a little bit about my collecting history and why I enjoy vintage cards so much. I first started collecting cards before I even knew I was collecting cards. And what I mean by that is when I was just a kid, and I was born in 71, but for some reason, and I don't know why, my parents or somebody must have purchased a pack of cards for me in 1974, because as long as I can remember and as far back as I can remember, I had in my toy box some 1974 tops. Um, some of them got a little bit more beat up than the others, but actually, for a little kid who didn't know what the hell they were, they remained in pretty good shape. And as fate would have it, and I definitely believe it was fate, a couple of those cards would play a lot more significance later on down the line when I really got into collecting in the 80s. So what I want to do is I want to show you, and you probably will guess where this is heading. When I first started collecting, my friends got me into it, and the thing to do back then was to collect certain players. Now, as you can see, I'm a huge Royals fan. Got George Brett right here behind me, and I think up on that corner is George Brett up as well. Everybody knows the Mick, and this guy here, Honus Wagner, somewhere back here. And then you can see that guy with George Brett, and we'll get to him in just a second. But anyway, everybody collected somebody, and I'm always kind of contrary to everybody else, so I collected George Brett, but I branched out, and there's other people that I started collecting far more than George Brett. But I had to find out who that person was. I was just an 11, 12-year-old kid when I started collecting, so I really didn't know what I was doing. So I had to find something to trigger, something to inspire me. And so I kind of went back to the past. And it started with that first handful of cards that I had from 1974. One of those cards, and the one I remember the most in my toy box, was this one. This is a 1974 Jerry Koosman. Again, not in the greatest shape because, again, it's in the toy box. Now, you might already know, based off the picture over my shoulder, where I'm going with this. So, another card in that bunch of 74 tops was this one, Nolan Ryan. Now, this is one of the most badass cards I've ever seen. I mean, look at that. I mean, I know if I was up at bat and I was looking at that, I'd probably be a little bit nervous. It's wild and it's hard to see through back then. But as you can see, you got a Jerry Koosman and you got a Nolan Ryan. So anyway, another few years down the line in 1980 or 81, there's a picture of me sitting on the floor by the couch, and there's my stocking, and I kind of remember this actually. There's some packs of football cards and there's some packs of baseball cards. Well, within the pack of the baseball cards was this card, Nolan Ryan. Again, another badass photo. I mean, look at those. I mean, that's great. Then the coloring, with the all stars with the Angels uniform, it just looks great. So anyway, I always knew I had those cards. Those were fresh in my mind. But in 1982, when I got into cards with my friends, I really had only those. I didn't have anything else. So I had heard that at the local Woolworths, there were packs of cards. So we just happened to be down there one day, and I'm sure I was shopping with my mom. And lo and behold, there's the packs of cards. So I got, I think, 2 or 3 packs. Well, when I got home and I opened them, and the very first pack was this Nolan Ryan. So I've got the 74 Nolan Ryan. I've got the 1980 Nolan Ryan. I've got the 1982 Topps Nolan Ryan. And on top of that, when Nolan was still with the Angels, my dad and I went to a Royals game. Now, normally we were way up high in the seats, nosebleed seats. We got good seats, not far behind one of the dugouts. And Nolan Ryan just happened to be pitching. We didn't go for that reason. I really probably didn't even know who he was. I mean, once I heard the name, I know I kind of remember having that old card in the toy box. I don't even think I had the 80 card yet because I'm sure this was 78 or 79. Well, long story short, my dad goes, Mike, what's that? What do you hear him? What's he doing? And some random guy sitting in front of us turned around and said, he's grunting. He grunts when he throws. I was just a kid, probably 8 or 9 years old. I thought that was the coolest thing. So all I focused on was him grunting. I couldn't tell you who won. I couldn't tell you what he did. I'm sure he struck out quite a few Royals because he struck out quite a few everybody when he pitched. But all this combined, seeing him pitch up close, which was one of the first times I ever was close, sitting, good seats at a game, having those old cards of him, and then getting into collecting. Oh, and I should say, in one of the other packs I got was an 82 highlights Nolan Ryan. So, I mean, I had 4 cards of Nolan Ryan. I knew who he was from seeing him pitch live and in person. So he became my guy, quickly became my guy. So much so that I had Astros everything. I had the orange hat. I had the navy hat. I had the striped shirt with all the different colors. And I had the road jersey. Eventually, I even had the navy blue that they occasionally use for games, but I think they use more for spring training back in those. Remember those hard plastic cheap hats that with the plastic band on the inside that if you wore it too long it hurt your head? I had the orange and the navy of that one as well. Now the jerseys I had were just knockoffs. They weren't like the ones that you see people wear now because we couldn't afford that. But I did get for Christmas one year a really nice Astros jacket. And I mean, I wore that thing out. And I wore the Astro stuff so much that even when I went to Royals Picture Day, I would wear all my Astro stuff. So Royals Picture Day back then, you could go out, the players would come out around the field, and you could get your picture taken with them. George Brett normally didn't come out because he probably would have been mobbing. And then Bo Jackson later on when he did it, there's too many people. But in the mid 80s when I started doing this, I used to wear my Astro stuff and go out there, and Royals players thought it was funny, especially Hal McRae. 2 years in a row, he just thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. And first he's like, why do you wear this? I'm like, hey, Nolan Ryan's my favorite guy. He's like, that guy throws hard. He's wild, man, but he throws hard. But he was laughing. He thought it was really funny. But anyway, that's how Nolan Ryan became my guy. That was before he became popular with everybody else. And I kind of got a little bit jealous when he blew up, towards the end of his career with the Astros, and then we went to the Rangers. I mean, everybody fell in love with Nolan Ryan, and it kind of pissed me off because that was my guy. I didn't want everybody else to like him. I liked him because not a lot of other people, especially around Kansas City, collected him. So, some of my best friends became huge Nolan Ryan fans. I'm like, oh, no, that's my guy. You pick somebody else. That's my guy. Some other guys that I collected Del Murphy, and I liked Phil Niekro. Now, in the Midwest, you got the Royals. We didn't have ESPN for a long time. We didn't get WGN, but we did get WTBS or TBS, whatever it was called. So watched a lot of NWA wrestling, and then it switched to WCW wrestling. And then we watched a lot of Braves. And Del Murphy became my next favorite guy after Nolan Ryan. For one thing, I was an outfielder when I played, and I was built a lot like Del Murphy. I was pretty tall for my age, and I was tall from the waist up. I was long waisted, just like Del Murphy. I was kind of gangly at times, just like Del Murphy. Um, so he was the guy who just naturally, I played center field. He played center field. As I got a little older, he was already a right fielder. Well, I had moved to right field. So there's another person I collected. For any of you who are my age, and I'm 53, back in those days when we collected, we didn't put cards in top loaders. I don't even remember even seeing top loaders back then. Everything was in a binder with the nines card sleeves. So cards were in there, even some really good cards that I'll show you in another video. But unlike all of my friends from the very beginning, I gravitated towards vintage cards. And there's lots of reasons for that. Even as a little kid, I was just a history buff. I used to look at my sister's encyclopedias and I'd go through all the presidents. I'm a huge presidential nerd. I've got over 300 presidential biographies in my library. I don't know why. Haven't even read them all. I may never get a chance to read them all, but I love presidential biographies. I read a lot of those. But I used to thumb through there, and anything historical really piqued my interest. Um, but another thing that really piqued my interest was I discovered we had a local card shop. And the local card shop was ran by a guy named Jeff DeLiesel, JD Sports Cards and Nostalgia. Now, I just literally found out 2 weekends ago. I went to a card show in Topeka. Now, I grew up in JD's. That's what we call them. Most people know him as Jeff, but I call him JD. I grew up there. Once I found that store, that shop, I was there several times a week, and I was a kid who would sit there and look at all these old vintage cards and just fell in love with them. And I just found out that he passed away. I went to a show in Topeka, and mainly I went to see if he was there. I'd been to up to a show in Topeka, Kansas for a while. The last 3 or 4 times I had been there, he had set up there. Now, he had a huge collection. If anybody's old enough to remember him, he had one of the best collections around in the 80s through the 90s. At some point, I think he might have gotten out of the business, because when I started seeing him set up shows again, he didn't have some of the cards. I don't know if he sold a bunch of his collection. I really don't know. Once I stopped collecting really hardcore towards the later 90s, I didn't keep in touch with him at all, sad to say. But I was just going to go up there and say, hey, I'm going to start selling at shows again, because he inspired me more than anybody to collect vintage cards. He was almost like a mentor to me. Now, a lot of my friends didn't care for him. I'm not sure why. I think a lot of that came from their parents who didn't like collecting cards, and it rubbed off on some of the kids. But I admired the guy, and he was always great to me. I actually would go to shows with him and help him at shows. And I don't know if any of my other kids or other friends had done that. In fact, I know none of them had done that at that time. But he kind of took me under his wing, and he taught me a lot about vintage cards. One thing that he did in his shop is he had these things called a bargain box. And a bargain box was simply a shoebox filled with vintage cards from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Mainly 60s and 70s. Cards weren't in great shape. They were mainly commons, and they weren't in there nice and neat. They were just thrown into the shoebox. And then he had wrapped up in rubber band, like the All-Star and Hall of Famers. Again, not great shape, but I was one of those rare kids who flipped the cards on the back and looked at the stats. So I was kind of a nerd that way. If you're familiar with Lawrence, Lawrence is where Bill James, the famous sabermetrician, he wasn't born there, but he lived there for a lot of, he still might live there. But when he made those baseball abstracts that really changed the world when it came to baseball analytics, and it's just, in the past 10 years really catching up. But he was there, and he sometimes would go into JD's store, and they'd argue about Hall of Famers, mainly Ron Santo. Bill James said, hey, he needs to be in the Hall of Fame, and JD would say, how can you have all these Cubs in the Hall of Fame? They never won anything. So I used to get a kick out of them arguing. I was one of the few kids at that time who bought Bill James abstract. I still have a bunch of them that I've saved over the years. But these guys really, just reading Bill James and learning about the history, especially when his historical baseball abstract came out, and just reading all this stuff about the history of the game really got me from the earliest age to gravitate towards vintage cards. Now, don't get me wrong, I have more junk wax than I'm ever going to know what to do with. I used to shovel snow all winter long and wait for the Topps, Donruss, and Fleer cards to come out, and I blow all my money when they come out in the beginning of the year. But I always bought a lot of vintage too, and those bargain boxes that JD would set. I swear he set them out there just for me because they'd be like $10 or $15. Nobody else ever seemed to buy them, but this guy did. I probably bought most of them out there. I swear he just put those out there knowing that I was going to go buy them. But it really kind of hit hard when I learned that he had passed about a year ago, because I hadn't seen him for a while. And one of the things that made me really want to do this YouTube community as well is, I've talked to Chris from Missouri about this before, and we really need to mentor younger collectors. All of us are getting a little bit older. All of us enjoy vintage cards, but card collecting is different now. When I was a kid, I used to hear people say, "Why are you collecting old guys? Nobody's going to want to collect that." I didn't believe it then, and I don't believe it now. But collecting's a little bit different now. The younger generation seems to be only into flipping cards, not collecting cards, not for learning the stories behind the players, the stories behind the card sets. So one of the things that I want my videos to be is to communicate to all of you guys to really educate young players on the history of the game and on the history of cards, and let them know there's more to just flipping. Flipping is very stressful, I believe, in many cases. And when I go to card shows and I see 10-year-olds buy $1,000 Patrick Mahomes card, I'm like, I would buy a $10 card and be thrilled. It's a whole different thing now. So one of the things that I want to get to in a little bit why I'm doing this is I really want to have us as a community take younger collectors and educate them into the history of the game, collecting vintage cards, the enjoyment of it. And I think, that we can start some type of movement to do that. I really think kids would be more involved because, hey, all of us, when we were little, most of us, I think a lot of us collected old cards along with all the junk wax. I know I did. A lot of my friends didn't. Most of my friends didn't. But as I got more serious into it and I started selling cards at shows as a teenager, I found that there were a lot of kids my age that were out there collecting vintage cards. Another thing that really got me into the history of the game was we did a project in school where it was a collage, and we cut out different magazines and stuff that the school had and just like storage areas and made a little collage with it. Well, there's Baseball Digest, which I didn't know Baseball Digest from Time Magazine or anything, Ranger Rick. But, I cut out some of those and made a collage. But then I just happened to start thumbing through it and reading it. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. A couple weeks later, I went to a local bookstore, walking past the magazines, and, you'd see the Sports Illustrated and the Mad magazine. You try to sneak a look at it, Playboy, and if nobody was looking. But there was this magazine, Baseball Digest. So this is the actual first one I ever bought. And this was December 82, I believe. Yes. So I ended up buying or begging my mom to subscribe, which I did. And I started it in sometime in 80, I think February 83 was the first one I got. And I subscribed to Baseball Digest till about 2001, which is when I really was kind of out of collecting. I'd gotten married, had some kids, and life changes. Work gets a little bit more important. And so I kind of got out of collecting hardcore at that time. But Baseball Digest was another thing that really helped me learn and appreciate the history of the game. I still have all those Baseball Digests in storage somewhere. I used to read them and reread them for years, even after I stopped subscribing to them that I did. Um, so why am I doing a video? Well, the biggest reason I want to do a YouTube video is the community. That's what Chris has harped on to me. That is what Jason has harped on to me. And many of you that have YouTube channels that I've watched from time to time, you kind of all preach the same thing. It's the community. I don't have any friends who collect cards. None of my friends in my personal life are card collectors. And so, and where I live at, I know they're out there, and I know they're out there because you guys are out there. And I just get a kick. It makes me feel young, and I can see how it makes all of you feel young too. And to me, this is a positive thing to do. It's fun. It takes me back to the happiest times of my life when I was a kid and carefree and didn't have a care in the world. And I used to sell at shows, like I said, and things are different now. I'm going to set up for the first time in probably 25 years at a card show in Kansas City in May, which is the biggest show that's ever been in Kansas City. I think they were going to have 600 tables. I think it's dropped down to about 450. But they're going to celebrate the 1985 Royals World Championship team and then the 2015 World Championship team. There's going to be a lot of players from those teams signing there. So it's going to be really interesting to do. A buddy of mine and his stepdad. Now, I just said I don't have any friends who collect cards. I've got a few, but they're not really vintage card collectors like I am, which is my main focus. I do collect some modern cards. Most of the modern cards I collect are like relic cards of, Hall of Famers from long, long ago. I don't buy a lot of packs and things of anything that's modern. That's just not me. It's not what I'm interested in doing. And I'm definitely not a flipper, so I don't have any reason to do that. But I want to be part of a community. I love the discussion. I love talking sports cards. My philosophy at the show, I hope I get my table money back because I've got 2 tables and it's not cheap. But I could, if I get my table money back and I'm spending 3 days talking cards and vintage cards to people, hey, what price can you put on that? I mean, that's therapy right there. I mean, that's just, I can't wait to do that. I want to pass on my love of vintage, like I've mentioned, to other people. I want to grow this community and I want to be part of this community. And the stories that people have, I enjoy watching the stories and listening to the stories that all of you have. And so I don't want to show a bunch of cards in this first video. It's long enough, just me dragging on here. But I'll probably be pretty hot and heavy with content just to get some messages out there, some stuff out there for you guys to all look at to keep your interest up. If you've got this far and you haven't turned off, I would love a comment down below. If I see you, comment down below and you have a channel, I will be sure to subscribe to it because that's the way to grow this community. I will say I do appreciate you for watching this. I mean, we all have busy lives, most of us do. And so there's no way we can watch everybody's content. And I'm just learning how to do this. I don't have any fancy special effects yet. I don't have music and different stats and stuff. At some point when I get better at this and I have more time and I know what I'm doing, I might do that. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to talk about investments and be preachy. I want to be telling about stories. And I want to talk about special things that have happened in my life that really help me love vintage cards. Now, I've told you a lot of the stories. I want to finish with one more. My dad hated that I collected cards. Hated that I collected cards. He thought it was a waste of time, a waste of money. It took up half of my bedroom. I mean, I had so many cards, you just couldn't even walk around in my room. Hated it. He's always harping on me to sell it. He never wanted to buy me any cards. He just wanted me to get rid of them all. He grew up in the Depression. They didn't have toys and stuff like that. They didn't have them. They came home, they did their schoolwork, they worked in the field. That's all he did. And if not, he got a good whipping for it. But one day, when I was about 13 or 14, my dad had gone to a garage sale. Now, my dad was a smoker, and so he always had those shirts with the pocket up here to put the cigarettes in. Well, he said, "Hey, Mike, come here." This is early on a Saturday morning. I was probably just getting out of bed, half asleep. He reached into that pocket and he pulled out about 15 or 20 baseball cards. They were almost all 1961 tops. I think there's a couple of 62 tops. Now, he didn't know anything about most of the players. He didn't know anything about the condition of the cards. Now, at that age, I was already a hardcore collector. I started collecting in '82, like I mentioned, big time. So I was like, whoa, wait, give them to me. So he handed them to me, and the very first card was a 1961 tops Bob Clemente. Now, he didn't know who Bob Clemente or Roberto Clemente was. He had no idea who that was. It just happened to be the one that he picked out. Um, and I'm sure my mouth was about that wide. I was like, wow. There's a Brooks Robinson. There's a Whitey Ford. There was a Duke Snyder. There are several different cards in there. And I'm still looking at these cards, and they're in really good shape, really good shape. And I'm like, I couldn't even talk. He's like, wait a second. And he walked into the kitchen, and he came back with a brown paper bag, like a lunch bag that you put a sandwich in. And he goes, here, look at this. And I opened it up, and it was about somewhere between halfway and 3/4 full of 61 tops and about a stack that big of 62 tops. Some were in average condition, but some are in really good condition. Now, over the years, I've sold quite a few of those when I started selling cards in the late 80s and early 90s. Sold quite a few of them. I still have several of them. But I asked him, like, where did you get these things? This is one of the things that now I would dream about because you just wouldn't see it. He had been out to garage sales. And there's this little old lady who had a table with some stuff set up. She had a bunch of brown paper bags. And so he looked through all those and he saw those cards and didn't want to get them for me because he hated me. Or he didn't hate me, he hated that I collected. But he bought them for me to be nice. So I said, how much did you pay? And he goes, 25 cents. I'm like, you got all these cards for 25 cents a card? That's incredible. No, Mike, no. I bought the whole bag for 25 cents. I mean, wow. Even back at that time, that was amazing. But over time, that's incredible. And so that may be my most special moment with my dad. It certainly was in terms of collecting cards because he almost didn't even buy those. Now, kicker to that story was he goes, hey, look what else I got. And he got another brown paper bag. I'm like, oh no way. And he goes, look at that. And I opened it up. There's a bunch of nuts and bolts. That's what he was most excited about. He got a great deal for $0.25. That bag was $0.25 as well, but a great deal on some nuts and bolts. I bet he never used any of those. In fact, I'm pretty sure he didn't because after he passed away, my mom passed away, looked through, I inherited his tool chest and all of his tools and his tool cabinet. And lo and behold, there's the sack of nuts and bolts that he probably put in there and never looked at again. But, that's what dads do. They buy nuts and bolts because why not? Anyway, I want to wrap this up because it's long enough. Again, if you like and subscribe, I would truly appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to see this content, and I will definitely, if you leave a comment down there, I'll definitely check out your channel too. Again, we don't have a lot of time, so the times that you guys do look at my videos, I'm probably not going to have a lot of hour-long videos. That's just not me. They're going to be short and sweet. I think I'm going to have, to show some of the oddball cards that I collect. I have a very eclectic collecting style. I don't really do player runs. I don't do set registries. I'm not a set builder, although there are some sets that I would like to do that are very short. And for someone on my budget, which is very low, it would be something that I can afford. I don't have most of the cards that I show you that are high dollar cards that aren't the modern cards. I've probably had my collection for 30 plus years. Most of these cards, the more high dollar ones, I got when I was a kid, and I have some really fun stories that I hope that you guys would be interested in. I will show you though something that I did spend a lot of money on for me. I had bought a modern day 2024 Leaf card that I couldn't find before I did this, but I have it stored away somewhere. But it has back cards of like Babe Ruth, Ty Cobb, Mickey Mantle, Joe DiMaggio, Ted Williams, Hank Aaron, and Joe Jackson. Now, we can debate all we want if Joe Jackson was guilty for throwing the World Series or if he wasn't. I can be argued either way. I mean, yeah, he had some good stats, but normally those were the games that the White Sox won. The games they lost, he didn't do so well. But it's still Joe Jackson, and he was an incredible ball player. And I will never, ever be able to afford a Joe Jackson playing day card, ever. That's not going to be in my budget. Even the PSA or SGC ones or the Authentics, I can't find any that are even remotely cheap. But what I did find at a show about a month ago was something, I've seen these all over at shows. I've looked at them, and like I said, I like to collect a bunch of odd stuff. So it's not just cards. But I found something that's pretty cool, and it's this. This is a 1914 Joe Jackson blanket. I think it's, what do they call these things? B18. SGC grades all of them authentic. This one's actually in pretty good shape. Now, I looked these up on eBay when I saw this, and I'm not going to tell you what I got this for, but it was way less than what you see on eBay. I've seen this dealer around. I think I bought stuff from him before, and I asked him, he didn't have a price on it. I asked him, what he would take for it, and I didn't have that much money with me. I mean, it was well beyond what I have, but I kind of bargained with them and got a great deal on it. So I'm debating whether or not I'm going to take this to the show in Kansas City, or if I want to keep it, because you just don't see a lot of Joe Jackson things out there that are affordable to guys like me. So this is really cool. I don't have anything like this. This is one of the oldest items that I have on my collection. I have some older cards in this, but it's shoeless Joe Jackson. Go on to eBay or any other site that you guys look at cards and try to find a Joe Jackson card that's affordable. If you can afford it, you're way beyond my means. So anyway, I only wanted to show this extra thing just because it was really cool. It's a recent pickup. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you different cards that I have. I want to talk about cards. I would love to be on some of those discussions that you guys have, because I want to learn more about the community. I knew a lot about vintage cards when I used to collect. Got out of it, and I'm relearning things. There used to not be grading. There's a huge grading debate. I started sending off cards for grading. Some of my videos that I'm going to show you will be about grading. Now, I'm not grading for the money. I'm grading for the protection of the card. And when I'm gone, because we can't take these cards with us, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier for my wife and my kids to liquidate these cards when I'm gone. And it will help them know the value of these cards. So I'm not doing it for a selfish reason to make money and profit when I sell them at shows. I'm doing it for a very unselfish reason. I'm doing it for my family, who are going to inherit these cards from me. But anyway, thank you for watching. I would love to see your comments, things that you would like to talk about. Let me know. I mean, there's no way, there's so many people who do these. There's no way I can do anything that's really original. I'll try to be as original as I can, but there's things that I've watched from other content creators that I want to do as well. So I apologize if you think I'm snagging or stealing some of your ideas. I'm not doing it to steal them. I'm doing it because I appreciate them and I enjoy what you do, and I want to keep that discussion going. So if I do it, maybe the next guy will do it, and we'll have this huge discussion about it, and everybody will become more educated. And like I said, this is fun for me. I'm not in here to do this for anything stressful or to add pressure. I'm not out competing with anybody. I'm out because it makes me feel like a kid, and I love doing it. Absolutely love doing it. I have a passion for vintage cards. So thank you for watching. Hopefully I'll see those likes and those subscriptions. If you subscribe to my channel, I'm going to return the favor and I will subscribe to yours. Thank you. Until next time, this is Mojo Mike.